This review is a weird one for me because I love this smartphone camera, but I kind of also hate it a little bit. Let me explain. So this is the Sony Xperia 1 Mark VI, a relatively camera-focused flagship smartphone, and it's actually the first time I've ever tested a Sony Xperia smartphone, and I have lots of thoughts. I guess to also make matters a little bit more interesting, I actually use professional Sony photo and video equipment in my full-time job. I'm a photographer and videographer, so let's break down all about this camera on this smartphone. There are a whole host of things that I like but also dislike about this smartphone camera, so I'm going to have everything noted on the timeline so you can kind of skip ahead and forward. But let's first talk about the way to get the best images, and that is the Pro mode. The Pro mode on this phone is absolutely fantastic. You get a really high quality way to shoot. Very fun for me personally is that the UI actually mimics Sony's Alpha cameras, so you kind of get a very similar experience if you're used to shooting on those cameras. But basically you get full manual control. It's probably the best way of actually shooting manual on a smartphone that I've kind of ever come across. I shoot in Pro mode all the time. I shoot standard JPEG plus RAW, and the RAW mode is the way you're going to get the best images possible out of this smartphone. In the ultra wide mode and also the standard 1x 24mm mode, you are going to get images that look absolutely gorgeous and genuinely I feel like could almost come from a professional camera. The highlights and image processing is actually doing a fantastic job. Like, Sony is almost doing less with these files than other leading smartphone manufacturers, so that is a really good thing for me. There's not a lot of artificial sharpening. Things end up just looking super nice and well balanced. I just wanted to throw up basically a whole bunch of examples. So these are all edited RAW files shot in that RAW plus JPEG mode as discussed. You do get a JPEG version as well, but these are the RAW files that I have processed through Adobe Lightroom. To be honest, I think if you put these side by side against a more professional camera, they probably stand up to being fairly close. I love the amount of kind of like artificial sharpening. It's like almost perfect. It's definitely got a bit of smartphone sharpness, but it's certainly not too much. This is the absolute best way of shooting with this phone. To add to things here, Sony has added a dedicated shutter button up here that also acts as a focus as well for a half press. So you can kind of automatically focus your images just with a nice simple press of the shutter button up here. Again, this is a very close experience to what you would expect with a more professional camera. So actually something with physical controls, and this is probably the closest experience that I feel like shooting almost like with a professional camera with a smartphone itself. So huge props there. The actual shooting experience on this phone, shooting in those Pro modes, have been fantastic. And the design and the build of this phone is beautiful as well. Like, it is really premium. It feels absolutely like a flagship camera. The whole thing is metal and glass. Certainly out there with the most premium feeling smartphones in my opinion. The main 1x lens has a beautiful 48 megapixel resolution now. Most of the time this is binned down to a 12 megapixel image. That actually even happens in the RAW mode. So when you are shooting RAW on this phone in the 1x mode, you're only going to be getting 12 megapixel images. I don't think that's actually an issue personally. I think they still look absolutely fantastic. There's definitely enough data and information there. But if you are wanting those absolutely huge 48 megapixel images, you can shoot in a 48 megapixel mode. I have to admit, I don't really see the advantage because you can actually only shoot in a JPEG mode, and something this camera struggles with, in my opinion, is its JPEG image processing. So I do actually think you're kind of losing the things that make this camera special, and that is shooting in those Pro modes and the RAW modes that we discussed earlier. But nevertheless, you can shoot in 48 megapixels if, for instance, you're wanting to just like blow up a massive image and print it. But yeah, I would still recommend, to be honest, shooting in the Pro mode and just shooting in 1x in RAW. Something which I've thoroughly enjoyed on this phone, and I actually think it is pretty much the standout feature. They are definitely almost like promoting it as a serious kind of headline feature on the Sony Xperia 1 Mark VI, but it is the macro mode. So you can shoot on the telephoto lens in macro mode, and basically what it actually allows you to do is essentially get almost like professional grade macro images on your smartphone. Like, they are genuinely fantastic. Because of the telephoto focal length, you're able to actually get images that just wouldn't be achievable on a smartphone. The level of compression and focus that you can actually get on this phone is just fantastic. I would say it's borderline not even like a macro lens. It becomes almost like a microscope. It's a super fun way to shoot, and you get some incredible compositions that are optically good. You know, this is not a fake bokeh mode or portrait mode. This is a genuine optical camera performance shooting some beautiful macro compositions. Love this from Sony. You are really pushing out the boat with smartphone innovation. This is a very good feature. And so we move from the great to the bad, and the telephoto overall, whilst we've just talked about how good it is from a macro perspective, the telephoto is probably the worst telephoto lens that I've actually ever used on a flagship camera. Don't get me wrong, it is a modern flagship smartphone camera. You are going to be able to get good images out of these telephoto zooms, but it is so wildly inconsistent you are going to end up with results which are genuinely not good a lot of the time. It's an optical telephoto zoom, so it goes from an 85mm focal length all the way to 170mm focal length, meaning that you can vary that distance and that focal range, so you could shoot at 105 and it would still be an optical zoom ratio performance. It's not like a digital crop or anything like that, so that is a really good improvement. I actually think a lot of the issues coming with this zoom are actually due to the stabilization on the Sony Xperia 1 Mark VI. I don't think the stabilization is very good at all, and obviously on a telephoto that's even more important because you're zoomed in, you're going to notice the shake a bit more. And what that means, I think, is what's happening is you're just ending up a lot of times with images that look kind of blurred or not very crisp. Forget shooting anything in low light with these telephoto zooms. Absolutely not going to happen unless you're literally still shooting a static subject. It's just going to not be a good time for you. It's almost such a shame because the ultra wide performance and the 1X are so good on this phone, but then the telephoto zoom and the kind of additional zoom range just ends up being really poor. Occasionally you might get a great image, but I would say for every 2 images you get out that are super usable and nice on this phone, you end up with 8 out of 10 that are just definitely not good when it comes to the telephoto. And that definitely is a theme for the Sony Xperia 1 Mark VI. It feels like this is a smartphone camera experience is much more targeted to enthusiasts or professionals, genuinely people who are trying to make the most out of having a camera like this. And obviously there's nothing wrong with that, but I just feel like they're absolutely not doing the basics right. At the end of the day, it is a smartphone. We're going to be shooting experiences and things we just want to capture in our everyday life, and there are a lot of times where the Sony Xperia 1 almost like hinders that experience without helping it. You'll be out wanting to snap a photo, things are just randomly quite overexposed. If I take my iPhone here, I don't think that has ever happened to me on my iPhone 15 Pro, like ever, let alone the Samsung Galaxy S24 Ultra. You don't get the kind of just random inaccuracies and overexposures and things of that nature. Don't get me wrong, if you are shooting in those pro modes, kind of trying to output the best image possible, there's almost like no better smartphone, or there's almost no smartphone that I would want when I'm shooting in either the ultra wide or the 24mm mode. The telephoto, as discussed, is a little bit different. Video is another bizarre element on this phone. So right now there is no way of actually recording pro level video on this phone, and what I mean by that is there's no way of manually changing those pro camera controls, so your shutter speed and ISO, whilst recording video on this camera. So they are releasing something apparently called cinema mode, which is going to allow a lot of those controls, but they have essentially launched a flagship camera without any kind of really good video app. And for me, that just kind of baffles me. The video performance looks fine right now, kind of what you would just expect from a flagship Android phone. Things are just crisp and nice. Again, when we go to the telephoto, things do start looking a little bit more questionable, but for the most part, I can't really judge the video performance because I can barely do things like lock exposure. You can lock exposure if you want to, but what I mean is like, there's no good, reliable ways of exposure control in the current smartphone app, and for me, that's just not really acceptable. You've launched a phone without a pretty killer main feature. An awesome feature of the Sony Xperia Mark VI is that it actually has an internal micro SD card slot, so you can expand the storage of your phone without having to pay for expensive internal storage. This is a big advantage. I've only got this clip because I forgot to record A-roll for this. Hey ho, what are you going to do? But anyway, this is a sick feature. And then finally, because we've been talking about those inconsistencies and some of the kind of experiences like that, we talk about bokeh mode. And I love bokeh mode. I think you can get some fantastic images, probably almost like the best portrait mode images that you can possibly get on a smartphone right now. But again, Sony Xperia here, you end up up just getting really randomly awful ones. And this is kind of why I've left this to this point in the video. You get some fantastic images, you get some ones which genuinely almost look like could be taken on a professional camera. Like, I love the fact that you have a decent focus sliders. You can really change whether it's going from super blurry to super not blurry. But again, this is almost like the story of the video for me. This camera is both fantastic, but also not, which I guess overall tends to mean it's probably not. I certainly wouldn't want to take this phone on like a vacation or trip that I was genuinely just wanting to capture absolutely everything perfectly every time with. But I guess if you're that much more enthusiast and you really want to know what you're doing, shooting in those pro modes, really playing with your exposure settings, this might be the phone for you.